principals, district leaders. Let's talk about something crucial in Putnam City schools. You're really on the front lines, making sure every student gets what they need. And with such a diverse student body, supporting your English learners, well, it's absolutely key.
It really is. You've got 5,270 EL students, which is, what, about 29% of the total student population. That's significant.
Your number.
Yeah, so having a deeper understanding of who these students are, their different backgrounds, it's vital for making good decisions at the leadership level.
Exactly. So our mission today in this deep dive is to unpack the 7 different ways Putnam City classifies EL students. The idea is to give you a clearer picture, basically, so you can target resources, think about PD, that sort of thing.
Makes sense. Getting specific helps everyone.
Right. Let's start with the kids who've grown up with 2 languages right from the start.
Okay, first up, simultaneous bilinguals. These are your students who've been exposed to 2 languages, essentially from birth, or at least before they turn 3. What's really interesting for leaders like yourselves to think about is how naturally they acquire a language. It's quite organic.
Okay, so for principals, for district leaders, what are the key things to notice or maybe watch out for with this group?
Well, often they'll sound very fluent conversationally in both languages, but their literacy skills, those might develop differently in each language. So you might see, for example, strong spoken skills, but maybe some challenges when it comes to academic writing, right?
Ah,
And targeted assessments, ones that really look at early literacy in both languages, can help pinpoint where support is needed. Also, think about professional development. Are your teachers equipped with strategies that really leverage all the languages a student knows, not just focusing on the English side?
that's a critical point, leveraging the whole linguistic picture.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears then. What about sequential bilinguals?
Right, sequential bilinguals. These students learned one language first, usually their home language, and then started learning English after age 3. The big advantage they bring is that established foundation in their first language. That's a real strength.
And how does that foundation, that first language, play out when they get to our schools?
Well, initially, you might find their vocabulary and maybe their grasp of grammar is stronger in their home language. That's natural. You might also see what people sometimes call a silent period.
Right, where they're absorbing.
Exactly. They're listening, processing the new language, not necessarily speaking much English right away. But, and this is crucial, that first language foundation, it's actually a powerful tool. It can accelerate their English learning.
So the question for us is,
Yeah, the question for you as leaders is how are we as a district making sure we're actively building on that existing linguistic knowledge? Are we valuing it, using it?
good question. Definitely something for instructional leaders to chew on. Okay, now, a group that I know gets a lot of focus, and rightly so, long-term English learners, LTLs.
Yes, this is definitely a critical area for strategic thinking at the leadership level. LTLs are students who've been in U.S. schools for 6 years or more, but they still haven't hit that English proficiency mark. And the data from Putnam City really highlights this. You have 1,530 LTOL students. That's nearly a third, 30% of your total EL population.
Wow, 30%.
And it gets even more concentrated in the older grades. Look at secondary, 2,510 secondary ELs total, and 1,382 of them are LTLs.
That's huge. Over half of the secondary ELs are long-term. That has major implications for middle and high schools.
Absolutely.
So what are the defining characteristics of LTLs that principals and district leaders really need to have on their radar?
Often these are students who were actually born in the U.S. or they arrived when they were very young, so conversationally. They often sound very fluent in English. The struggle tends to be with academic language, the complex vocabulary, the sentence structures needed for math, science, social studies.
The language of school itself.
Precisely. And what's, well, maybe concerning from a systems view is that their journey might have been impacted by, let's say, inconsistent or perhaps not the most effective ELD instruction or literacy support over the years. The sheer number of LTAL-Ls, especially in secondary, it really prompts a question for leadership, doesn't it? How can we maybe audit our current ELD programs? Are they truly meeting the long-term academic language needs of these students?
A systemic review seems necessary there. Okay, let's move to another group with distinct needs. Students with limited or interrupted formal education. SLIFE. That name itself suggests big gaps.
It does. SUS Life students are those who've missed significant chunks of formal schooling. Could be for many reasons: war, migration, poverty. And the result is often gaps, not just in language, but in foundational literacy, like knowing how to read and also core academic knowledge. They might not know basic math concepts or historical facts that other kids picked up.
So for principals, for district leaders, what does supporting South Life students effectively mean in practice? What does it look like?
Well, first, they might just be unfamiliar with how school works. Routines, expectations, bells, it can all be new. From a leadership perspective, the key is understanding they need really intensive, direct literacy instruction. Plus, major scaffolding for both language and content.
Can you give an example of scaffolding in this context?
Sure, scaffolding is like temporary support. Think visual aids, graphic organizers, simplified texts, sentence starters, things that help them access grade-level material while you're also building those missing foundational skills. It demands a really individualized approach, and frankly, it's resource-intensive. So the question becomes, how are we ensuring our schools have the systems, the training, the staff time to provide this deep level of support?
That need for intense individualized support really stands out. Okay, let's talk about newcomers.
Newcomers, pretty straightforward definition, students who've arrived in the U.S. recently, usually within the last year or so. And as your Putnam City data shows, many newcomers are also classified as immigrants born outside the U.S., been in U.S. schools less than 3 years. You have over 1,000 students like that.
So when a newcomer walks into one of our schools, what are the immediate priorities?
Top priority is usually initial English language development. They're often right at the beginning stages, you know? But it's not just language. They might be dealing with culture shock, the stress of a new place, maybe missing home. That initial adjustment period is just huge.
So what should leaders be focused on?
Robust newcomer programs are essential. And specific instructional strategies like sheltered instruction, making lessons understandable with visuals, gestures, modified language, hands-on stuff, and maybe above all, creating a really welcoming, supportive school climate that's not just nice to have, it's non-negotiable for these kids.
Absolutely crucial for setting them up for success in those first critical months. Okay, now a complex intersection. Dually identified students, ELs with disabilities.
Yes, this requires really careful coordination and oversight from an administrative level. In Putnam City, you have 726 EL students who also qualify for special education services. The challenge and the goal is to address both sets of needs, their language needs and their disability-related needs effectively and without compromising either one.
So what are the key things for principals and district leaders to keep in mind here? What makes support effective for dually identified learners?
It really comes down to collaboration. Seamless teamwork between your EL specialists and your special education teams is paramount. Their language goals and their IEP goals have to work together, be integrated.
Makes sense.
And as leaders, you need to be really mindful of the risks of misidentification, both over-identifying ELs for special ed or under-identifying them because a disability might be masked by the language learning process.
Tricky.
Very. It means ensuring your assessment practices are sharp enough to tell the difference between a language acquisition challenge and a learning disability. That takes specific expertise, specific training for both EL and SBT staff.
That collaborative piece, getting EL and SBD teams working hand in glove, seems absolutely essential there.
Yeah.
Okay, one final category, refugee students.
Right. Refugee students are those who are forced to flee their home country due to persecution, war, or violence, and they arrive with official refugee status. Putnam City Schools is currently home to about 275 refugee students. They come from places like Afghanistan, Burma, Venezuela, Cuba, Syria, Sudan, places facing immense turmoil. This is a particularly vulnerable group.
And their needs likely go beyond just academics and language.
Oh, absolutely. Many refugee students may have experienced significant trauma, loss, unimaginable disruption. Plus, they and their families are dealing with resettlement challenges, finding housing, healthcare, navigating a completely new culture, maybe dealing with grief or anxiety. So the support from your schools has to be holistic. It has to include robust social-emotional support alongside the academic and language instruction.
What does that look like from a leadership perspective?
It means actively connecting families with community resources. It means ensuring your school environment is trauma-informed, meaning staff understand the impact of trauma and create safe, supportive spaces. These are really critical leadership responsibilities for this population.
Wow. This deep dive really paints a picture, doesn't it? The sheer diversity within the EL population in Putnam City schools is clear. We've touched on simultaneous bilinguals, sequential bilinguals, those long-term English learners, ISLIFE students, newcomers, the dually identified students, and refugee students, each group with its own unique profile.
Exactly. And for you, the principals and district leaders listening, the big takeaway, I think, is that English learner isn't one monolithic group. It's this wide spectrum of experiences, strengths, and needs. Recognizing these 7 classifications, really understanding them, is fundamental. It's the bedrock for leading effectively in this area. It should directly inform how you allocate resources, what kind of PD you offer, the interventions you put in place, all aimed at equitable outcomes.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. Considering the specific characteristics and needs we've discussed for each of these EL student groups in your schools, what's one key adjustment? Maybe it's a resource allocation, maybe professional development, maybe specific instructional practices. What's one area you could prioritize or perhaps reevaluate starting tomorrow to better support these diverse learners? That's your challenge to consider. Thanks for joining us for this important deep dive.